With the untimely passing of the original writer and author of Berserk, Kentaro Miura, in 2021, it felt like as good of a reason as any to revisit the series, and I was yet again enchanted by the world, entranced by the violence, and infatuated with the characters. When I reached Miura's last released chapter, it felt like a sense of longing and desperation that I'm sure so many others have as well. As the final official chapter, it was beautifully open-ended, but human greed knows no bounds and I wanted to see more. When it was announced that the series would continue under the supervision of Miura's longtime friend Koji Mori, and done by the former assistants and proteges of the past Miura under the banner of Studio Gaga, all the curiosity came rushing back, and some of my most burning questions want to be answered, and these are the plot threads that I'm most excited to have continued. Note that while of course I would like to see the conclusion of Guts and Griffith's story, because that is the overarching plot and the one everyone is most excited to see, I decided to not really touch it as it would be way too obvious. If Griffith was Megatron, then Rakshas would be Starscream, and who doesn't love the twist that a Starscream brings to a story? As one of the strangest figures in a series filled with strange figures, Rakshas is best described as a living shadow, making him particularly annoying to deal with due to his malleable body structure. We know that Rakshas was exiled from the Bakiraka, and in fact he's seen as one of his former clan's greatest marks of shame, and as a reader, I would personally love to find out why. Did he perhaps sacrifice a number of his clansmen to obtain greater powers? Did he trade clan secrets? Was he a former chieftain who gave up on his responsibilities? All these things are just begging to be answered. I don't even know if Rakshas himself truly hates his clansmen, as we have yet to see him actually kill any one of them, and in the events of the Windham War, he led Silat to see Ganishka for the monster he truly is, as though to dissuade him from serving the Mad King into his inevitable demise. And while his past is a point of interest, his future is just as captivating. When Griffith and him first meet, Rakshas makes it clear that he will one day attempt to end the Falcon's life, but that he will serve him until that day comes. And to that point, he seems to have kept his promise, even going as far as to do some of the dirty work. Being an apostle would make him naturally subservient to Griffith, much like Zod has become, but Rakshas seems to have retained some sense of self-control that is unparalleled within the new band of the Falcon, and goes out of his way to put himself in key events such as hiding in Zod's wing to witness up close the merging of the physical world and the astral world during the events of the World Tree. Is there a reason why Miura wanted to specifically include Rakshas into this world-altering event? We can only speculate. With Griffith at the forefront of the new band of the Falcon, he is able to utilize a particularly large army of apostles to bolster his human one, essentially making his forces unstoppable. And while it initially looks like sunshine and rainbows in the city of Falconia that miraculously sprouted from nowhere after the events of the World Tree, on the very outskirts of the place lies the dark dimension known as Pandemonium, where his apostles reside. While within the confines of Falconia, things seem like the average man's description of heaven, Pandemonium shows us a true glimpse of hell. Although it is true that Griffith is able to direct the apostles, and it is also true that apostles for the most part can't truly go against him, Griffith isn't able to quite fully tame them either. To let them release their pent-up violent tendencies, Pandemonium seems to be the place for them to do so. While the zealous Locust sees this as a good thing, I personally see this like those people who have those exotic pets who assure you that things are fine up until those pets devour their faces. At the moment, Griffith seems to surround himself only with ass-kissers, but as Rakshas and Ganishka display, it isn't impossible for an apostle to wish harm on Griffith, and who's to say there aren't others that also have that desire but simply unable to? Will Griffith's authority suddenly wane and the apostles get set loose on the neighboring humans? Will Pandemonium start growing larger and larger until the apostles can no longer be contained? Will Griffith find humans lacking and suddenly decide to turn everyone in the world into apostles? So many options. Although not a phobia, the way the Bihilith has facial features all jumbled up has always unsettled in an inexplicable way. I suppose that is the goal of its design, but let's talk less about the look of these Humpty Dumptys and talk about them as plot devices. From the get-go, we know that Bihiliths play a vital role in the story, as living proofs to the concept of destiny within the series. Prior to the complete merging of the physical realm and the astral realm during the events of the World Tree, they serve as the only real method to perform the same feat, although on a much smaller scale. While it's true that as a result its role has turned significantly smaller, the fact that it is still being hauled around by Puck means, at least to me, that something is still expected from it, especially considering the fact that this particular Bihilith has been a part of the story since the prologues. In the short time that we had with the witch Flora, she insinuated that Bihiliths may even dictate all that is and all that will be, while also alluding to an existence to something otherworldly. What's key here is that I would note that considering the fact that Flora knows of the existence of the God Hand, yet still chooses the words an even greater existence, makes it seem like there are even grander existences out there. In other words, there's a chance that everything we've seen in the story so far is in like 2D, while the very existence of the Bihilith means that there is a 3-dimensional plane with beings that we simply cannot even comprehend. Reeling it back though, at the moment we know the Bihilith's utility, but not its purpose. Will Guts use the egg to have a one-on-one with Griffith? Will Guts need to rely on it to become the thing he hates the most? Will the egg be the final piece for the Skull Knight's sword to power up? Or is the God Hand really just a small portion of an extra-dimensional being's full body? Can't wait to find out. For the most part, the story of Berserk really revolves around Guts and Griffith, and the culmination so far has mainly been both assembling larger and larger forces. Guts' party is small, but each of his members are highly skilled and specialized, while Griffith's army is large, but held together solely by Griffith. On the outskirts of these two, however, is a third force that is seeming to be gathering themselves, and I can't wait to find out where they'll go from here. As the youngest original Band of the Falcons member, Reichert escaped the fate that the others met due to being injured and simply being a little late to the events of the eclipse. Feeling thankful for having not been sacrificed like his brethren, but also having survivor's remorse for this very same thing, Reichert has always felt conflicted as he's only able to remember the old Griffith was somewhat of an idol to him due to not having seen the terrible things his former commander had done. Having then come face to face on a one-on-one setting in Falconia, Reichert made his intentions clear. He will not stand with Griffith. While on the surface, losing Reichert may seem like a small thing for Griffith's army, as he is only after all human, but we've seen Reichert quietly become one of the greatest minds of the era. With his natural curiosity and talent being nurtured by the famed blacksmith Godo, maker of Guts' iconic Dragon Slayer, Reichert's inventions are at least decades ahead of his time. Not only is he the creator of Guts' metal prosthetic arm, who has continued to be vital to the Black Swordsman even after years of non-stop battles, Reichert has created rudimentary versions of powerful weapons, including flamethrowers and even rocket launchers. With a little bit more time, who knows how this kind of technology can be further improved, and perhaps this might be the thing that pushes Griffith to his downfall. Just Reichert alone would be a pain in the ass, but escorting him is one of the greatest human fighters in Silent. While a longtime antagonist that was bested by Guts every so often, ignoring that anomaly, Silent is one of the most dangerous humans currently living, and was able to survive everything the story has thrown at him so far. Led by Silent are the Tapasas, who are large fighters whose physical bodies are honed to perfection. The most exciting part of all this is that Silent offered to bring Reichert to his people's hidden village, and we can only assume that there resides a large number of powerful assassins that Reichert may be able to rally to his cause. This becomes even more possible considering that Silent was attacked by members of the Griffith's army and has personally vowed to want nothing to do with demonkind. And finally, as if that wasn't enough, we have Ganishka's former second-in-command, Daiba, who is one of the world's greatest sorcerers. During the Great War, his magics were one of the many pivotal strengths of Ganishka's army, and with him tagging along with Reichert just means that there is yet another powerful tool left in the toolbox. His motivations are currently a little unclear, and the way that he could be utilized can also be kind of interesting. We know that some Kushan still exists out there even after their former king's downfall. Will Daiba rally these remnants to bolster Reichert's group? We know that Daiba's dream is to create a kingdom of magic. Will he perhaps assemble the greatest collection of mages? We also know that he has more than one loyal Garudas. Perhaps he has a Garuda farm up north. In other words, while at the current time and place this ragtag group of misfits might seem inconsequential, their potential at least seems quite high. Whether it be Reichert leading technological advancements, Silent returning to his clan of skilled assassins, or Daiba potentially assembling remnants of his army or hordes of mages, there's no telling where we can go from here. Heck, we can even see skilled assassins flying on bird monsters with rocket launchers raining fire on Griffith's army. Who knows? Could be fun. Symbolically, the Tower of Rebirth plays a major role within both Guts and Griffith's story. Like the name suggests, this place is where Griffith truly starts his journey to being reborn into Femto. Guts always did view Griffith as this angelic and heavenly existence, and it was here that he saw the man in his most vulnerable state. While for Griffith, the Tower of Rebirth was his own lowest point, where he realizes that he was now willing to give anything to become an existence that stood above all, after suffering horrific punishments. To me, the Tower of Rebirth's true charm, however, is that I believe it hides what is essentially the Rosetta Stone of Berserk's history and holds the answers to most of our deepest questions. Princess Charlotte, during the Griffith rescue arc, recounted the tale of the first Emperor Geyserik and mentioned that the capital of that once great empire was locked deep inside the hole that the Tower of Rebirth was built upon. And why does that matter? Well, let's quickly review some scenes that we know as truth and speculate from there. First, let's revisit Charlotte's brief recounting of history. She mentions the mysterious appearance of Geyserik, who appeared on the battlefield and strategically dominated his foes to found what is essentially the first great empire. While First Emperor would be a cool title, instead his moniker was the Skull King due to his battle gear including a helmet shaped like a human skull. Right after that is mentioned, Guts immediately thinks of another enigmatic figure that he knows as the Skull Knight. I think this inclusion was intentional even this early on in the story, but if you need proof, let's talk a little bit about one of Guts' signature piece of his arsenal, the Berserker armor. While the armor that we know as is bears no resemblance to skulls, the Berserker armor originally did come with a skull-shaped helm due to the last wearer emphasizing skulls. When Guts peeked into the Skull Knight's memories, the Skull Knight described his past as the end of a foolish king in reference to himself. And to explain why I'm super excited about this lost city at the bottom, we'll need to fall deep into Speculation Town. I hate to be that conspiracy theorist guy who draws shapes and things to prove a point, but note that in the few memory scenes that Miura specifically drew, he intentionally included twice a large hole in the background, almost as though the location was deep down somewhere. In the other scenes, we see that at least one member of the God Hand in Void, we see a ton of apostles, and at the very least, one person with a brand of sacrifice, which could arguably be freshly etched. Now, what I think we are getting a glimpse of is a past eclipse, potentially that of the Void, who could also be the founding member of the God Hand, though I can't really back that part up yet. The reason is simply due to the sheer number of monsters, or apostles, in the same cursed room. Prior to the Great Astral Roar, the only time we've seen such a large number of apostles in the same area is during Griffith's eclipse after using the Crimson Bihilith. And we know this isn't just a regular Bihilith situation, as we've had regular Bihiliths being used in the Count and in the Egg of the Perfect World. Both times invoked the God Hand but felt more intimate as no other apostles are summoned along. The deals oftentimes don't require that many sacrifices really, as the Count for example was only asked for a single sacrifice in the form of his daughter, while the Egg of the Perfect World only had to sacrifice himself. And when those specific deals are concluded, the people not a part of the deal typically end up okay, even if physically present in that dimension. Whereas using the Crimson Bihilith to start Griffith's eclipse summoned hundreds if not thousands of apostles, much like what's being depicted, as well as everyone present being branded and marked as food for the apostles' feast. I'm going to assume that you can accept that what is happening in that flashback is indeed an eclipse where the Skull Knight or Emperor Geyserik was caught in, as well as the woman he is holding. Now, let me try to convince you that the area we're looking at is at the bottom of the Tower of Rebirth, as I imagine pointing out there is a hole isn't enough to convince you. In the same chapter that Charlotte first tells us Geyserik's story, Casca drops her torch, which is a bummer for her, but for us readers gives us a glimpse of what lies at the bottom. Not only does this small incident confirm to us that Charlotte's statement that the ancient city being down there is at least somewhat truthful, there is also a pile of corpses, each with the brand of sacrifice on their forehead. Again, regular Bihiliths don't require a large number of sacrifices, and the only time we've seen a multitude of people being branded is during an eclipse. So I think it's safe to say this is the aftermath of an eclipse. And what eclipse do we know of includes a more senior member of a God Hand, Emperor Geyserik, and is potentially at the bottom of something. Well, it seems to me that this is probably Void's eclipse that Geyserik was somehow able to survive, which also explains why the Skull Knight seems to bear some affection to Guts, who went through much of the same thing. As cool as the past is, what does it mean for the future of our series though? Well, considering that the oldest recorded history ever mentioned with some level of credibility is the Age of Geyserik, it could be possible that Void was the first God Hand member, perhaps performing the very first eclipse. In that case, maybe at the very bottom hides the secrets that could lead to the God Hand's downfall. Maybe locked away is a method to undo the transformation that these God Hands have undergone and return them to human form, or at least render them more vulnerable. Perhaps the place might answer who exactly the dying lady that the Skull Knight held in his arm is. Shirky, which I've never actually had to pronounce her name, speaks to how that lady resembles Danan, the Lord of the Elves, and then Mira also included a strangely melancholic one-on-one between the Skull Knight and Danan. We know that Bihiliths can open rifts between the astral world and the physical one, and I don't think it's unfair to say that the Crimson Ones who start eclipses should probably open bigger rifts. We also know that elves are astral beings who can enter the physical world if they want to, though that maybe during the events of the first eclipse introduce the two worlds for the first time and allow elves to slip into our world and reside in that middle zone. Did that lady somehow reincarnate into the elven monarch? If this theory holds water, could the city down there perhaps hide a way to permanently close the two worlds off? I really don't know, and what's most probable is that all of this is probably just flavor text, but it's this kind of thing that keeps us thinking. To close things off, there are so many plot threads to follow, but some of them are kind of obvious and will probably reach their conclusion through the general unfolding of the story, such as how things will end between Griffith and Guts. So I wanted to take a look at some B plots or even C plots that I think can be just as aspiring as the main storyline. Do you have something that you hope will have some kind of answer or some kind of payoff? Or maybe you already know the answer to one of the ones I want to see, and perhaps the secret to all life and creation is somehow hidden in a small chat bubble that I missed. In any case, I hope you dummies enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. Any of them works really, I don't particularly mind. That's all from me. See y'all next time, dummies.